Hello everyone, I'm pleased to present to you my topic for today. It's a topic that is useful for every translator, talking about the problems of using Google Translate in translating colloquial dialects and literary works. Let's see some translation epic errors that appear on signs and menus. Here, green onion leaves is translated into البصل الأخضر يغادر instead of أوراق البصل الأخضر. In this menu, مشوي مشكل is translated into grilled problem instead of mixed grill. When you want to take a photo for someone, you ask them to get ready by saying say cheese. Google Translate translated it into قل جبن, and it is a word-for-word translation. But we can domesticate it by translating it to قل بطيخ, or we can foreignize it by translating it into قل cheese. Which one do you prefer? So, what's Google Translate? Google Translate is a free multilingual neural machine translation service developed by Google to translate texts and websites from one language into another. Google Machine Translation (GMT) translates whole sentences at a time rather than just piece by piece. It uses this broader context to help it figure out the most relevant translation, which it then rearranges and adjusts it to be more like a human speaking with proper grammar. It was used since 2006. Google Translate now serves 200 million people daily. The cons of Google Translate is that the meaning can be lost in translating literature because there is no way to incorporate context. The complexity of the text makes the likelihood of errors greater. Avoid using Google Translate for professional translation. Why? Because a machine doesn't have a sense of humor or understands emotions, so it cannot always find the perfect words for a particular text. Also, the tools don't translate cultural values, which is found in most literary works. Let's know what are the common errors of Google Translate in translating literary works from English to Arabic and vice versa. Many types of errors might occur when using Google Translate. I'll mention some of them. Wrong alternate meaning of a word, wrong part of speech, lexical generalization, definition constraint, mistranslating idiomatic expressions, omission, skipping, errors in formality, and errors in passive-active structure. This study finds that generally machine translations, including Google Translate, tend to deliver a word-for-word but not a sense-for-sense translation pattern. It would be unfair, nevertheless, not to mention some advantages of Google Translate. In fixed phrases such as titles, names of organizations, and famous people, users can trust the machine for the provision of correct translation. In summation, based on these findings, users of Google Translate must be very careful when the machine is in use. What makes literary translation so difficult and so challenging for any translator? The translation of literature differs greatly from other forms of translation. One of the key challenges of literary translation is the need to balance staying faithful to the original work with the need to create something unique and distinctive that will evoke the same feelings and responses as the original. I'll mention mistakes literary translators often make. Here are 7 mistakes literary translators often make. First, literal translations. By translating a script word for word, which almost changes the meaning of the translation from the original. Second, exaggerating the meaning of words. An effective translation shouldn't overemphasize any word so that it alters the intended meaning. Third, depending too much on translation programs, as software programs can't always determine context or recognize tones or determine emotional states. The fourth mistake is misunderstanding the context of a word. If the translator misunderstands the context that a word is used in, he will translate it differently, which can alter the original meaning. The fifth one is getting the tone wrong. It is most times very difficult to accurately convey the tone used in the source text, as it can change constantly. The sixth mistake is ignoring cultural differences, as translating without considering cultural differences can result in uncomfortable or even offensive situations. The last one is overconfidence, as not having work proofread is not only overconfident but also foolish. Regardless of the skills and abilities, possessed mistakes are always possible, even among the best. So what are the stages of a human translation process and what makes it better than machine translation? First, we write the draft translation. Then we check the translation. After that, we edit the translation, and finally, we proofread the translation of us. This bar chart gives us information about the right and wrong translation percentages using Google Translate. About 20% of the translation using Google Translate is wrong. These 20% absolutely refer to the translation of literary or religious works. Let's talk about the cultural differences in literary works, particularly the Palestinian colloquial dialect used in short stories. Let's have a look at the translation of Google Translate to these Khalili words. What can we translate them? We translate them into the English equivalent, or we can explain them. For example, هل أيت, we can translate it into at this moment or now. Could, we can translate it into perhaps or maybe. Abilla, we can translate it into certain or sure. Skamla, we can translate it into a small beside table. Crake, we can translate it into digging shovel. Babouj, we can translate it into slippers. Translating dialect must in some way reflect its uniqueness and diversity. You have to be faithful to the words of the text, trying not to diminish the quantity, or to alter as little as possible the quality of the images they contain, but you can act freely in reworking the syntax. Let's discuss the examples from this Palestinian short story written by Dr. Muhammad Ayub, which is about an old man who loved working day and night in his olive farm, taking care of the olive trees as if they are his own flesh and blood. Let's see how he defends his land. We are going to notice the mistranslation of Google Translate in some sentences and to suggest better translation for them. In this example, we can notice the difference in structure between Arabic and English. The omission of أسلوب القصر إلا changes the meaning of the whole sentence. I translated it لكن أبا حامد يأبى إلا أن يعلو بعزمه وهمته فوق الكسل والرغبة في الخلود إلى الدفء والراحة, as but Abu Hamid accepts only to keep his resolve and activeness over laziness, warmth and comfort. In this sentence, we have the word حاضراً, which was mistranslated into present. Instead, we can omit it as it means praying at the time of Fajr prayer in the mosque. I translated it, he performs ablution to pray Fajr prayer in the village mosque. Here we have a lexical difference in the wrong alternate of the adverb منشرح الصدر, which doesn't mean open chest. Also the wrong alternate in the word أصبح, which is rendered to became instead of created الذي خلق الصباح. This is a simile that shows translating the word أيما incorrectly and using wrong parts of speech by Google Translate. Here I translated the simile as he tipped his mouth to kiss the stalk of the olive tree, as if he is kissing a beloved who he became so besotted with and who he absolutely adored forever. Let's notice some mistakes here. In the first example, we can notice the word constraint for the cultural differences by translating ملابس إفرنجية to French clothes, and by translating عرقي into my race, by translating ملعون أبو الزمن into cursed Abu al-Zaman by transliterating it, and the word tabu remains as it is tabu. Here I explain it as strange clothes, and I use the equivalent word for this profanity word using curse on this time. You need a title deed for my land, and saying he said disapprovingly. I explain it and capitalize the word title deed to show the power of the spoken words by the old man who was oppressed by Israeli soldiers. At the end of the story, we have a grammar error, missing the verb to be and listing without a fanboy or using a suitable subordinator. I believe the end of the story has to be powerful. I used here the past continuous tense to show the sequence of the sad events which describes the old man's death moments by translating this olive tree is my entity, it's my life. Abu Hamid leaned on the back of his mule, his chest was rumbling, and blood drops were flowing from the corner of his mouth, and sadly his eyes were staring at the above distant horizon. Let's watch this video. It's a Palestinian song. It was for you, doctor, to comment on the translation of the colloquial words by Google Translate.
أنا فلسطيني وافتخر واللي مش عجبه ينتحر. أنا فلسطيني وافتخر واللي مش عجبه ينتحر. راسي عالي بالعلالي دمي غالي وشايف حالي. راسي عالي بالعلالي دمي غالي وشايف حالي. أنا فلسطيني وافتخر واللي مش عجبه ينتحر. الله الله.
I suggested to translate it as I am a Palestinian, I am proud to say goodbye to who dislikes you, my head is so high, up in the sky. Or we can explain it as I am extremely proud of myself, or I have every reason to be proud of myself. I believe the good translator might be the one who tends to pick up his or her own approach over the perfect kind of acceptable translation. There's no one clear-cut or deep-seated approach of unique translation. The translator might be as the same as the good teacher in terms of the selection of the most suitable way of conducting the work. To sum up, translation is a very tricky task of linguistics. It has always been a complicated job. Translating Arabic texts into English necessitates a huge bilingual expertise. Moreover, the cultural and religious influences are very strong in both languages. It has been shown that, though lexical problems are greater in number, grammatical, stylistic, usage, and phonological problems are not insignificant. Translation is not merely about conveying meaning, it is something more. Thank you for listening. Hope you like my presentation, and goodbye.